Hi, I'm Hector Del Castillo, CEO of Bold PM, and I'd like to welcome all of you to today's discussion. And thanks so much, Susan, for a great introduction. Special shout out also to the great IT professional and CAI for hosting today's event. The topic for today is emotional agility. We're going to be covering a little bit about why you need it and how it can make you a more effective leader. Here's a quote from Susan David, who is the author and inventor of the phrase called emotional agility. And it's a quote that defines what it is. Emotional agility is to be with your thoughts, emotions, and stories in a ways that are compassionate, curious, and courageous. It's about embracing your emotions and understanding how to use them in a positive way to figure out how to get from where you are today to a new or a different future than what you think or fear or doubt that you can get there. So it's about really building that agility over time. And just like any other power skill, you can actually build it by taking some of the steps that we're going to be discussing today. I also want to remind you that if you have any questions, you can actually submit them on the Q&A, and we can make sure that we answer them either on this particular discussion or offline. So our goal for today is to help you understand what is emotional agility and how it can help you become a more effective leader. So we're going to be covering three different things. Number one, why you need emotional agility, the steps on how you can build greater or strengthen your emotional agility, and then we'll discuss key takeaways. Let's go ahead and get started. So why do you need emotional agility as a leader or as a manager? Well, number one, a recent study conducted in 2020 at Queen's University in Canada found that the average person will typically have more than 6,200 thoughts in a single day. And this is a publication that was published in Nature Communications in July of 2020. And the study was one of the most recent ones that actually started putting subjects and created a real-time three-dimensional MRI of thoughts in the brain, and they describe what appear to be brain worms that happen, and each one of those is a different thought, and they can occur in different regions of the brain. They were tracking the subjects for a few hours and then calculated the amount of thoughts in a single day for the average person. And the age range of the people were fairly young, between 29 all the way up to about 65 years old. And that's what the study is all about. You can read more about it in the Nature Communications magazine publication and their blog. Multiple studies, furthermore, have also really thought about how our brain tends to shift into thinking about the negative things all the time, all the what ifs. And multiple studies, including this study that was performed at Cornell University, have found that 85% of the thoughts that we have in any given day never actually happen. And yet, sometimes we're filled with worry, anxiety, doubt, depression sometimes, and all these things never actually happen. This particular study that I'm quoting was conducted in 2005, and multiple studies have been done ever since, and they all show the same thing. And even further, for the few things that did happen, the people found that, number one, first lesson learned is that most of them thought it wasn't really as bad as they thought it would be. And number two, they actually felt that they were much better prepared than they thought they would be when they encountered this issue, and they learned a valuable lesson. So there you go. This is the reason why our emotions are sort of like an early warning system that allows us to anticipate things that could happen that may have, from a project management point of view, you want to be able to identify during the initiation of any project, the risk involved, and be able to not only understand and anticipate some of the things that may be more likely to happen, but also start showing some planning and analysis for anything that may be, any risk factors that may be high impact, but low likelihood of happening, and make sure that we at least prepare our teams accordingly to make sure that we can move forward no matter what happens. But often it's about expecting that setbacks will happen. Murphy's Law is well in effect. And this is what we do as project managers, is figure out how to get our team members to figure out how to move forward when we have are facing a setback or we have just experienced a setback. So let's talk about the difference between emotional agility and emotional intelligence. My guess is that most of you are most familiar with emotional intelligence because that's been discussed in multiple studies and in multiple publications. A lot of emphasis in the 21st century about building emotional intelligence. And the definition of that is just being aware and in control of our emotions. So it's about strengthening our self-awareness, strengthening our self-management, the way we respond to things when they're causing sort of like negative emotions. Emotional agility is the ability to adapt and respond to your emotions in a flexible and effective way. It's about embracing the emotions in a way that allows us to start figuring out how to move forward no matter how we're feeling, as opposed to being aware of our feelings, but then figuring out how to bottle those feelings up or how to brood over them. And neither one of those two options is good because over the long term, they might cause some emotional trauma. When we bottle up or brood over a long period of time, often just having emotional intelligence alone is not enough. And often, these are the things that we need to work on, is figuring out how do we continue to stretch our mind, our mindset, in order to move from a emotionally rigid stage to a more agile stage. Here are some of the elements of the more typical emotional intelligence. Number one is, as I mentioned before, it's about self-awareness. It's about self-regulation of our emotions. It's about empathy. It's about strengthening our social skills, and then also being able to not only motivate ourselves, but motivate and inspire others, especially those that are in our project teams. There's so much focus on this, so you can actually start looking at this. What we need to start looking here is, why do you need emotional agility? So let's take a look at what most of us tend to do. What matters most for leaders? Well, studies have shown that, and this is actually out of the book, the publication Emotional Agility by Susan David, PhD, the author that I spoke about earlier. This is what most of us experience. What we're told very early on throughout our education process and in high school and college, and it gets more and more solidified, is that hard skills matter most. In reality, for leaders and for people managers, what counts the most is what's on the right-hand side of this, which is our ability, our power skills, which is our ability to empathize with others, to focus on our core human strengths, and those are our personal core values, be able to be authentic and be trustworthy in order to create trust-based relationships so that we can build and nurture strong relationships, so that we can learn how to collaborate with people when we are all have a shared goal and share objectives. How to align values between one person and another when these people are all part of a larger project team, and being able to regulate our emotions in addition to showing others how to do it on their own so that we can all work effectively together and collaborate and strengthen teamwork. So really about emotional agility is about strengthening our own emotional skills, our power skills, but also being aware of other team members and being able to help them also overcome those emotions in a way that is more positive, and as opposed to them brooding or bottling up emotions, being able to share them and then be able to move forward despite all of this, and figure out a way to encourage and support each other when some people are having doubts, anxiety, or are feeling that they are not going to be able to get the job done as needed. And it's about being able to help them move forward. How does lack of agility impact leaders? Well, somebody who's in an emotionally rigid state, which is the opposite of emotional agility, their thinking becomes more rigid and more repetitive, and they become more stuck in old patterns. And often those old patterns tend to play over and over and over in their heads. And that's what causes these particular negative emotions that introduce fear, doubt, anxiety, depression, all these different stages of grief. Negative thoughts usually stall our own personal development. So we stop learning and we stop figuring out how to learn something new when we need to acquire new skill sets. And also it impacts our decision-making abilities. And this may not happen to young people, but it may happen once you start experiencing different things. We start creating all these ladders of inference inside our brain, and then that will trigger making snap decisions and snap judgments without actually trying to understand what just happened so that we can figure out what is the right way to react in order to move forward based on what we're trying to achieve. And emotional rigidity can be there over time. For some people, it may be that they have been brooding on emotions for some time or bottling up those emotions over time. And this creates maybe one or compounded emotional trauma. Often they become more and more rigid, emotionally rigid over time, and that's how we get affected. And often it's people that are well in their 30s or maybe in the early stage of middle age. And for some of us, middle age may happen at different points in our life. And it's all about figuring out how to train our brains so that we can continue to be emotionally agile in order to avoid any of these things that may negatively impact our leadership skills. So now let's take a look at the key components. Now that we understand why we need to start exercising our brain and our mind and our emotions so that we can actually remain in an emotionally agile stage, let's talk about the components that are part of being able to develop emotional agility. Number one, we need to be aware of our emotions and recognize them for what they are. Just because something that, there's doubts or fears doesn't mean that that whatever we're fearing, whatever we're doubting about ourselves or about others is going to happen. What we can do is figure out, is anybody else in our team feeling the same way? And if you're feeling it or somebody else is feeling it, likely is the rest of the team may be feeling some form or negative thoughts that need to be discussed and figure out how to remove those emotional roadblocks from the mindset of the entire group that is your team, and figure out a way to accept, embrace some of these difficult negative emotions rather than trying to suppress or avoid them. Figure out how to move forward and how to encourage and support each other to prevent those negative emotions from impacting our productivity and our engagement and the way that we work together. And it's also about recognizing that emotions don't have to define you, don't have to define me, but rather that we have the power to choose how to respond to them at any one time. And the more that we communicate those emotions to someone that may be an accountability partner or perhaps a mentor or a coach even, we can actually start figuring out what are the options to overcome these negative emotions. The issue is that most of us don't think that we need to share this with anyone. And often we do. Either a coach, a mentor, or even another team member that we trust, an accountability partner. When you have an accountability partner, when we're doing work together, these are all things that and people that we can share these negative emotions to figure out how to overcome and move on and use these emotions in a positive way to figure out how to prevent some of these things that may be high impact, low likelihood, but that we can remove any emotional roadblocks or obstacles that may be in the minds of other team members so that we can move forward together. It's about being able to regulate your emotions in a way that is healthy and adaptive. And it's about cultivating a growth mindset within your teams so that you can start figuring out very quickly ahead of time, going through what if scenarios. And if you're seeing some challenges, how to turn these challenges into opportunities. And if something just happened, how to actually turn a setback into a comeback, and then be able to figure out what is the next things that we need to start learning and continue learning in order to actually become more effective in increasing our productivity as well. Let's talk about some of the benefits and the top benefits as to why you as a leader need to strengthen and build greater emotional agility. Number one, when you are in an emotionally agile stage, you are able to create higher trust-based relationships and therefore collaborate greater. Multiple studies have shown that collaborative teams are also high trust teams. And that means that trust is among everyone within the team that is working together. And everybody is in harmony. Everybody's clear about what they need to do, that they need to do it together. and how you need to work together in a way that things can get done much faster than having individuals work on individual tasks and then passing them on to the next person. Often, it's about building and strengthening relationships. It's about becoming more empathetic, being able to build trust, being able to enhance collaboration, and then being able to have difficult conversations when you need to in order to figure out how to move forward together. The next is about increasing your adaptability, becoming and remaining flexible and adaptable no matter what happens. And sometimes when some of these emotional traumas maybe come out or some drama happens in the workplace, it's really tough too because they tend to distract, they tend to often trigger negative emotions in you. And if it's happening to you, it may be happening to other team members. And often you need to make sure that you keep the harmony within the team so that work can continue to proceed. So staying flexible and adaptable, being able to adapt to changes very quickly, and being more open-minded, curious, and then willing to experiment with new ideas that you haven't tried before, and be able to figure out how are you able to improve the productivity or the efficiency and the way that you work together. There's always room for improvement, and it's always a matter of just being able to practice new things to see if they work. And if they do, great. How can you continue to do more of that? If they don't, then figure out something else that you can do. These are all things that allow you to start looking at focusing and possibly using greater adaptability to get things done within your team. And then the next is about boosting your personal resilience and really boosting about your team's resilience to be able to bounce back when a setback occurs. And usually resilience is defined as the ability to quickly bounce back so that you can actually get back to where you were before whenever you encounter a setback. My definition, and I like this definition much better, is figuring out resilience is about how to move forward despite any adversity, despite any obstacles that you might reach, figure out how to work around them or jump over them, whatever it takes to make sure that you continue to move forward in the right direction. Sometimes you might need to take a detour. Sometimes you might need to make a U-turn, but often it's about figuring out how to move forward no matter what obstacle you have encountered that you did not foresee. And that's what emotional agility allows you to boost your own and your team's resilience when you're working on building greater emotional agility on your own, but also within your team as well. It allows the entire team and allows you to make clearer decisions because it allows you to be able to be more self-aware, more reflective, and then be able to consider the different possibilities and options before you make a decision. And you can make those decisions in a much clearer way. And not only would you be able to do it on your own, but you'll be able to allow the entire team to go through these things together and then make quickly a decision as to what is the best way out of the many options, what is the best way to move forward that will allow you to accelerate what you need to do. And it's about being able to quickly handle setbacks and how to actually turn those setbacks into comebacks. It's about your ability to cope with challenges and being able to allow yourself to become more resilient, more adaptable, and then increase that ability to be able to quickly bounce back from any type of setback. And then finally, it's also about enhancing your own creativity and innovation, and also being able to cope with challenges and then be able to have more creative options as you are exploring options and then coming up with new ways of solving problems that you may encounter along the way. And often this is all the things that you don't only want to be developing on for yourself, but you want to be able to enable your entire team to become more creative and more innovative and try new ideas, new fresh ideas that might help you accelerate or get to where you need to go faster. So now that we talked about the benefits, and there are many as leaders, let's talk about the steps on how to build emotional agility. And these 4 steps on figuring out how to strengthen or build greater emotional agility are the same 4 steps that are actually in the book that I spoke about earlier, Emotional Agility by Susan David. These are the 4 steps that are outlined in more detail in that book. We're going to go through them very quickly, and then we're going to go into more detail about each one. So number one is about showing up, being able to face your thoughts, your feelings with curiosity, compassion, figure out a way to use those in a positive way. It's about stepping out, being able to detach yourself from whatever is happening, and then be able to detach yourself and see the big picture first before you make a decision as to how to move forward. It's about number three, being able to walk your why. Whenever there's a conflict is more than a clash of ideas. And what you need to do is figure out whose ideas are clashing. Why are they clashing? It may be because the shared values within the team are not clear, or the personal values, and no one really has found out how to align your personal values and everybody else's personal values in the team with the shared values within the organization and within the project. And that needs to be done on a group level. So often it's about focusing on your own personal or core values and understanding that those core values will vary person by person. And it's okay as long as everyone agrees that you have certain shared values and commitments that require you to be working together with everyone else in harmony. Number four, moving on. And that is about taking short, small, incremental steps in the right direction. And sometimes it might be zigzagging, but moving towards your main goal. And you realize that moving from point A to point B is never a straight line. It's going to be an iterative process. Sometimes there may be some bumps on the road, sometimes some obstacles, and you need to figure out how to quickly navigate around all those things to get you to the final destination where you want to get to eventually, and figuring out how to do this together with your teams as well. So let's talk more in detail about this. Showing up. Showing up is about spending time, maybe a few minutes a day. Sometimes people will vary. Sometimes you may have different activities that allow you to meditate and acknowledge both positive and negative thoughts and feelings, and figuring out why some of these feelings seem uncomfortable. And then figure out a way to get you to use those in a positive way to begin conversations with the rest of your team in a way that does not hinder communication. And if you're working in an agile team, this is easy to do whenever you're actually either at the beginning or doing the retrospective of your iteration or sprint, or maybe even bringing up some of these things in the daily stand-ups so that you can actually start programming in them and figuring out how to quickly go through, sample your team, and make sure that you can identify any obstacles or roadblocks. And some of these may be intangible because they may be emotional obstacles or roadblocks, and you need to figure out very quickly how to encourage and support each other to overcome them and use them in a positive way. Number two, about stepping out. It's about unhooking yourselves from your thoughts, your emotions, and your feelings so that you're able to define that they're not going to be defining you, that you're detach your current status with future possibilities, and figure out how are you going to get to where the end goal when some of these things may be distractions, momentary distractions, and you need to figure out how to overcome them very quickly so you can continue to move forward in the right direction. So it's about stepping out and saying, I'm feeling this way, and it's about figuring out what do you need from others in order for you to feel like actually you're making progress and use those emotions in a positive way. It's about figuring out how to eliminate any drama, because conflict doesn't have to be drama all the time. Walking your why. Walking your why is about understanding your own personal values and making sure, figuring out how to align them with the shared values of your team within your organization, and use those to actually ensure that you maintain those mutual commitments that require that teamwork to continue. Being able to use those in a way that, as opposed to creating negative thoughts and emotions, that you're able to create pathways that allow you to continue moving forward and continue to work together with your teams. And number four, it's about moving on. It's about figuring out how to continuously take lessons learned, realize that setbacks will happen. That's the way of the world. Expect that, and be prepared to expect the unexpected. Anticipate that change will continue to happen. Anticipate that setbacks will continue to happen. And it's all about figuring out how to quickly recognize, be aware of when those happens, and make sure that your team members are aligned so that you can bounce back as quickly as possible by figuring out the best way to overcome an obstacle or problem together and identify the best options that allow you to get further out and bounce back much quicker. So those are the 4 steps. In a nutshell, when you are on the extreme and you don't do any of those 4 steps, over time, expect that you're going to become more emotionally rigid because most of us are either brooding or we're bottling up emotions. Those are the 2 options, and most of us will tend to do this over time, even involuntarily, because we never have been taught how to actually start implementing these 4 steps that I'm talking about here to help you stay in an emotionally agile stage, or at least be able to maintain your emotional agility as much as possible by exercising these 4 steps on an ongoing basis. And if you have never done this before, there are groups where you can actually start implementing these steps on your own, or you can bring in an expert to help your team overcome and go through this 4-step process together so that you can continue to maintain high engagement throughout your teams. And that's emotional agility. So the key takeaways, as I mentioned, we're wrapping up. Emotional agility helps you build stronger, more trusting relationships. Because of that, it will help you boost your adaptability and your resilience. It will help you build more trust and therefore enhance collaboration within your teams. It will help you hold difficult conversations and figure out how to overcome problems together as a team when you need to. It will help you be clear as to how you're going to make decisions and what priorities should be and what you're just not going to entertain at all. And also, it will help you enhance creativity and innovation and figure out new ways of doing things so that you can continue to maintain collaboration and productivity as high as possible within your project teams. So with this, I'm wrapping up. And also I want to say that if you want to actually start attending some of these trainings and workshops that allow you to start practicing some of these steps, you can actually subscribe to the Bold PM community. And we're actually starting to put together a set of power skill development workshops. And we're going to be announcing them soon. If you want to be on that mailing list, you can actually go to the short URL at the bottom of this slide and then be able to get notifications and reminders once we announce those power skill development workshops. And then here's my contact information. If you're actually looking to land your next career transition, we're also in the process of launching job search support groups. These are for job seekers that are looking for their next dream job. And we're going to be starting those soon. And we're actually going to be speaking in the near future also about the value of being able to join a job search support group when you are in the job search process, especially in today's marketplace. If you want to get this a copy of the post-event page and a link where you can view today's discussion, the video, but also the slides, and then other references, be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn using the short URL at the bottom of this slide, but also be able to, you can also email me and let me know that you attended or you watched today's discussion. I will send you a link where you can get access to this entire conversation and discussion today. With that, I'd like to thank you all for a great discussion and hope to see you again at a future great IT professional discussion. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your week.